Thanks for joining our webinar series. I'm just going to wait a few minutes so some people can join, and then we'll kick off with the webinar. Cool. I think we can kick off. Cool. Thank you everyone for coming to another Legalese webinar series. Today we'll be talking about how to win the game that is sports law. This is another session in our So Now You Know series. If you want to check out any of our other So Now You Know webinars, you can catch them on YouTube. A little bit about me. My name is Lion. I am the head of data and regulations at Legalese, and I'll be taking you through the webinar today, chatting about sports law and just important things that we'd like you to know. So a little bit of an overview on today's session is that we'll first be talking about exactly what is sports law. Seems very straightforward, but we can still chat through it. Who does sports law affect? Who are the parties involved? Participants? Where the sport and law intersect. Same with any industry. And then lastly, important aspects of sports law that we want you to know about. Before we start, please feel free to pop any questions that you may have in the chat function. I'll try to get to them during the course of the webinar or otherwise at the end. So, kicking off, what is sports law? Yes, the law infiltrates sports as well. Sports law is the laws and principles which are applicable to all the relationships which are found in sports and the sporting industry. So sports law encompasses many different areas, from the basic being commercial contracts. So all the kind of contracts that we know about can be related to branding deals through sponsorships and merchandising, as we all know, sports franchises and associations, venue hiring, lease agreements, photography, broadcasting, and all the way down to employment and freelance agreements. Sporting industry, like any industry, is all encompassing. It touches on a lot of different legal spheres, and there's a lot of aspects to it. Who is involved? So the sporting industry has many parties who may be involved. We all know the athletes, those that play the sports, those that take part, the people that we see. But then there's also the coaches and the managers. Coaches being the ones who, coach the teams. Managers being not only team managers, but also athlete managers, people who manage the careers of the athletes within the industry. But outside of them, the sporting industry also involves sports teams and the people who work for them. The sporting industry is massive, and sporting teams can have a full staff base, from medics to administrative staff to all kinds of people in there. Then we have sports associations. As we know, the big one being FIFA. There are many other sports associations around the world. For example, the FIA, which regulates the most sport industry, etc. We have stadiums and venues. As we know, we have the massive stadiums, which are all across the world in various cities. For example, like the English Premier League and all those stadiums. We also have smaller club stadiums or club venues or sporting grounds, which club sports take part in. And lastly, but not least, we have sponsors. The real financial backing behind sports around the world are sponsors, and this is across every single sporting industry. So sports and the law. Well, where do the sports and law intersect? Well, the law is everywhere. In the same way that sports is governed by the rules and regulations of each sport or sporting body, so too does the law regulate sport. Where there's an agreement between two or more people or two entities and a person, or any sort of agreement between two bodies, the law will be there. And as I said earlier, the sports industry permeates many legal spheres, from the contracts that athletes sign with teams to sponsorship and brand deals, all the the way down to the hosting of sporting events, such as, for example, the World Cup that's happening right now in Qatar. Onto the nitty-gritty bit of this webinar. For this section on, we're going to talk about just a few important aspects that we wanted to raise within, the sporting industry and law, and where these intersect, and things that we want to draw your attention to. If you have any questions, again, as I said, feel free to pop them in the chat function. So firstly is contracts, which is essentially the life and blood of not only what we do as lawyers, but the foundation of any industry. And as I said there, contracts are the life and blood of any relationship. And the same can be said for sport. So whatever role you play in the sport industry, big or small, it's very, very, very important to ensure you have a contract in place. What's spoken about in the media constantly is contracts that are, signed between athletes and big sporting teams, or, between sponsorships, between brand deals. Contracts are the foundation of all of these things. And one of the things we wanted to hammer home is the importance of having a contract in place. First and foremost, in that contracts create certainty. Without a contract, you won't know your up from your down, your left from your right, what you'll be getting paid, what they'll be getting paid, what's required of you. That is the point of a contract, is to get this information down and ensure that the parties are clear on who and what they need to do, what their roles are, and that is just the fundamentals of it. Secondly is that contracts are a vehicle for negotiation. Contracts afford both parties the opportunity to have their side heard, to have their wants and needs included within the agreement. The aim of a contract is not to be unilateral, it's not for one party to get more than the other. The aim is for there to be negotiation and for the intention of both parties to be recorded within the agreement. Parties also establish appropriate relationships. As I said, different agreements offer different things. You're not going to have a brand or sponsorship deal for an athlete that's signing on to a team. Contracts are there to establish the relationship at hand and make sure that that relationship is regulated appropriately. And lastly, contracts, in the same way that they provide certainty, they provide an understanding on things such as confidentiality and dispute resolution. Dispute resolution being one of the more bigger things that have come up in the sporting industry of late, that and also termination. I don't know if anyone watches Formula One, but for example, Daniel Ricciardo got requested by McLaren to be bought out of his contract in favor of Oscar Piastri. That is a termination, that is a ground termination for his contract, and through the vehicle of negotiation, he was able to receive his full agreed upon salary that he should have gotten for the 2023 season through negotiations with McLaren in his contract. Another contract that's been in the spotlight lately is Cristiano Ronaldo's Manchester United, for example. He's now terminated his contract with immediate effect. That would have been a clause in the agreement, something that they had put in for grounds of breach or termination, or even where the relationship has come to an end or met an irreconcilable point. So those are all aspects which you consider, and you don't think about the fact that those are all based in a contract. Those are all founded in contracts, and that's the importance of them. The way I've been speaking from mostly is a contract that's drafted from scratch, but where you as an athlete or a club or a sporting association or business receive a contract and you're unsure about it, you can always have that contract reviewed to advise you on your rights and responsibilities. Never go ahead and just sign an agreement without first looking at it and looking through it and understanding how it affects you, affects what you're going to do. If this is in respect of, for example, a brand and sponsorship agreement, how that relates to you and the business, as we'll chat about a bit further on in the webinar. But yeah, it's very, very important to understand the value in a contract firstly, and where you've been given a contract, to always nitpick it and look through it to understand how it affects you and your relationship to what the agreement covers. Next is sports clubs, associations, and companies. So if you're thinking of starting a sporting club, this can be just a group of friends wanting to start a club, wanting to start a league. Even if you're looking to start a business that brings people together to play a certain sport, there are many different ways that you can go about it. One of the easiest methods that's used widely is the method of a voluntary association. VAs are not regulated really, like a company or a trust, for example, and they simply require the creation of a founding constitution that sets out the the rules and the things that the club will be guided by. In the same way that a company's got a memorandum of incorporation, a VA will have a funding institution. However, if you're looking to possibly grow your sporting business, or have an entity that has more of a separate legal identity, you can always follow a different route, either through a trust or through a private company. And both of these vehicles are equally valid, with a private company as being a more commercial prospect for those looking to start a sports-related business outside of just the club or association. And then, especially with regard to companies, another point that we want to touch on is the importance as an athlete to consider how you're going to manage your business. Similar to an association, athletes may create a company or several to own their brand and IP and handle all the associated business affairs. As we've come to see in the last few decades, is that athletes are no longer just people who play a sport on behalf of a team or on behalf of their country. They've grown, and athletes have become brands and celebrities in their own rights. It's no longer just about them playing sport. Athletes are models. They represent the face of popular brands, and they themselves become a brand in their name. And it's very important to protect your brand, very important to protect your identity. And this is very easily done through a company, which will then own all your intellectual property, own all your sponsorship, your brand deals, handle all these aspects of your business outside of the sport that you play and what you do as your on the field job. And this basically leads us into our next talking point, which is sponsorships, branding, and merchandise. So, it's common knowledge that every business needs a revenue model. And for most modern sports teams, this comes in the form of sponsorships. Sporting is an incredibly expensive industry. There's no sport that can be considered cheap or cheap to do. And again, for a team or an athlete, sponsorships and branding deals are the main asset. Understanding your intellectual property is therefore extremely critical when entering into any sponsorship or brand deals. Intellectual property for an athlete, or more specifically a sporting team or club, is everything. It's the team name, it's the logo, it's a trademark, if there's a mascot, if there's uniforms, league names. All of these things are intellectual property that deserves to be protected. And that's what leads us into the next point about important things to consider when entering into a brand or sponsorship deal. First is understanding who you will pay royalties to, if any. Royalties may not always be a factor, but it's something to always be aware of and to consider if you will be paying any royalties and how that will be paid, and what will go into that. Secondly is understanding how a sponsor will use your IP. So even though a sponsor will request that you put their branding and their name on maybe your jersey, maybe your venue, maybe sporting equipment, it's also important to understand how they will use your branding, how they will show that they are your sponsor. Is there exclusivity? Is there not? Another important factor are what is the obligations of the parties under the sponsorship? As I said earlier, exclusivity is a big consideration. Are you not allowed to wear a competing brand to that sponsor? Must you wear it for a certain time period or a certain number of times? What is the sponsor's obligation to you? What do they need to give you? Or what are they giving you in order to be your sponsor? And then, as I've said now twice, the last point is it exclusive or not? Are you allowed to have other sponsors? Is that sponsor just the most important one, or do they have bigger area space within which to advertise their name? These are all things that are very, very important to consider, because you want to make the most of your brand. You want to make the most of the opportunities that are offered to you. You want to make the most of basically what's out there. You don't want to unfairly box yourself into a sponsorship or one sponsorship where, there are many opportunities out there. One example of a big sponsorship change is the rebranding of the Cape Town Stadium to now the DHL Stadium through a brand sponsorship deal that DHL has undertaken. Everything in the stadium is now rebranded. It references DHL in, when you buy tickets to see a sporting event at the stadium, it's no longer called the Cape Town Stadium anyway, is now fully at the DHL Stadium, and that comes through a massive brand or sponsorship deal. So, although we might think of it and sponsorship and brand deals sound like a dream come true, you need to be cautious about the inner workings of that relationship, because sponsorship and brand deals can be quite difficult to navigate. Obligations that sponsors might place on you may be onerous, and it's always something to be cautious of. As I said earlier, you need to understand whether it's exclusive or not. You need to understand whether you could have other sponsors, lesser sponsors, different sponsors, competing sponsors, because you want to make the most of your brand. Another important aspect that's not spoken enough about is being cautious of entering into a relationship with a sponsor, or equally on the other end, if you are a sponsor, with a brand that could ruin your reputation later down the line. You may not know this initially, but it's something to consider. Companies are no longer just what they do, it's who they are, it's what they stand for, it's the principles that they hold themselves up to. And you don't want to enter into a brand deal or sponsorship deal with a company that doesn't value what you value, that does not value what your team values, that doesn't align with your team goals. Because in that way, you bring your brand down by associating with that sponsorship. And that's something very important to consider. Something in the media, it's not necessarily sporting related, but one can consider the relationship between Kanye West and Adidas. That was a big branding deal. That was a big, massive revenue stream for both parties. And through one party's actions that misaligned with the goals and values of the other party, the relationship broke down. And now both parties suffer. And the branding deal and the things created therefrom, they suffer as well. So that's very important to consider whether when taking on a sponsor, whether they align with your goals and your values and what you deem important, to ensure that the sponsorship is beneficial for both parties going forward. Next, we're going to move on to venue, leases, and permits. So we've spoken a lot about signing contracts to play sports, signing contracts to have sponsorships, and that's all in the process of getting there. It's where things are already set up and the sporting event is ready to be held. But something that's not considered enough is where it's held and having all the documents in place to ensure that it's held, legally and lawfully. The first is venue. Picking a venue is very important. I know we may think of sporting events, we think of them on a large scale, you think of stadiums, big massive stadiums that we have in all the cities, but sporting venues are also fields and pitches and gyms and venues. These are all sporting venues. And that's why it's very important when starting a sports club is to consider the venue. Sports clubs need to be aware of zoning in the city that they are operating before they set up their venue. Zoning is when a city decides what areas will operate as either residential or business areas. When deciding on a venue, you need to understand that when picking a venue that is in a traditionally residentially zoned area, you may open yourselves up to complaints from aggrieved residents who are now subject to additional noise or disruptions or increased traffic due to the sporting venue. So it's not spoken enough, but it's an important factor to consider. I know things are changing a lot with zoning being questioned, venues are being set up in places that they weren't before, gyms are in places that they traditionally weren't before. It's always just a factor to consider. You don't want to open yourself up to undue complaints and unnecessary hardship just based on the venue that you've chosen. Next is lease agreements. Lease agreements are no one's favorite. Nobody likes them, but they're unavoidable. And it's very important when you sign a lease agreement to understand what you're getting yourself into. With any lease agreement, there are positives and there are negatives, but it's again important to read and understand what you're signing. Two things or two ends of the spectrum that I definitely want to bring to sporting clubs or sporting venues' attention is one, leases that are longer. It is always important to understand whether you're locking yourself into a lease unnecessarily. Leases that are signed for too long of a period without appropriate termination mechanisms, you might find that you're now locked into a venue that you don't want to be in, that doesn't suit where your business is going, that doesn't suit the sport, like I said earlier, it could be in a residential area and you're receiving a portion of complaints, but you're stuck in a lease that you can't escape. This has been signed for too long of a period without appropriate termination clauses. On the other end of the spectrum, what you need to be aware of is leases that may be too short. You don't want to, find your dream venue, set it up, really establish it. Your client base and your athletes and whoever in your industry suddenly gets used to you being in this venue, word of mouth grows, but then your lease comes to an end and now suddenly you have to move and change the space that you've now grown accustomed to, that your clients have grown accustomed to, that you've, worked into your own. So that's just another aspect to be aware of. So how to sign a lease for a term that affords you time to grow, but also affords you the opportunity to move on into a bigger, different, or updated venue should you need to. Lastly but not least, is the aspect of permits. In all the cities within our country, you can't host an event if the city says no. The city won't always say no, but it's important to understand when you do or do not need a permit. For events above a certain size, and this can be, club events, soccer or rugby, cricket, even for example, and then events on a much bigger scale, so stadium events, things like I said at the DHL Stadium in Cape Town, or any stadium of that size, you will be required to obtain a permit, because permits not only relate to the use of the space, but they also relate to crowd control. With sporting events being lots of people, you need police presence, safety and security, medics, all these aspects of things to consider when hosting a sporting event. And permits are very important to have because they regulate all these aspects. Depending on the city that you're located in, your municipality will be the one that hands out these permits and ensures that everything is done lawfully. And last but not least is the aspect of broadcasting and photography. This is, not new knowledge to anyone, but the sporting industry worldwide generates hundreds of billions of dollars. It's said to be worth something like $350 billion worldwide across all sporting disciplines. And the reach of sport is done through broadcasting. I mean, that's how people get access to it now. Think of the FIFA World Cup in Qatar. We're able to feel like we're there and see the games through broadcasting. So fundamentally, if you're an athlete, a team, a club, a gym, the only way to grow and reach a greater fan base is through broadcasting. There are, however, financial implications that come with signing on to broadcasting. And in this context, I mean television broadcasting, for example, is that broadcasters often require security as the ad revenue. So remember, yes, they're allowing people to watch your sporting event, but they generate income through advertising. And they may then normally require you to give them some sort of security or confirmation as to the number of people that will be viewing the event and the sponsors or brands that have signed on to display their advertising for the duration of the event. Another aspect to consider is that broadcasters have been in this game for a long time, and they may subject you to contractual terms that can be very onerous or hard to understand and place a lot of burden on you as the sporting team or the sporting club in order to have your event broadcast. I mean, in South Africa, for example, we all understand the power struggle and limitation that comes with the fact that we have one network who has a monopoly over the right to broadcast sports as opposed to the other. These are all very intense aspects and it's very heavily regulated, but even though it might be a monopoly, that's how we're able to see our favorite sporting teams, see our favorite sporting events from around the world. But, with all what can be called negatives come positives. And now that at a grassroots level, social media now offers a great platform to offer and to bring viewership to sports without the hurdle of traditional broadcasting and broadcasting rights. Displaying your sporting event on YouTube through YouTube Live or whatever other social media, you then allow greater viewership to your sporting event without that hurdle that traditionally came with broadcasting. Another big aspect to consider is that of photography and photographic releases. If you've ever been to a live sporting match, you'll see that there are photographers who line up around the pitch, but very specifically, it's not just anyone who's let in, it's not just anyone from any newspaper or magazine or sporting agency that's let in. These are all done very strategically through agreements and what is known as photographic releases. These releases are very important because they allow you as the sporting team or stadium or venue or sponsor to control the images which are then published. And in that way, you create the most benefit through the images that are released and create the biggest benefit to your brand. When you're able to control what's released about your team, you are then able to control the intellectual property, the image, the look, the feel, the style of what's being put out about your team, about you, even as an athlete. Controlling photography can also create a revenue stream for the club. You can use those images to create merchandise and use it for sponsorship or brand deals, as we've spoken before. This then again plays into the aspect of exclusivity that I chatted a bit about earlier. But again, it's very important. By all means, you can allow just anyone, to take pictures of your event if that's what you want. But we just wanted to highlight the importance and the value controlling who gets to see the images that are released and the photographers that are able to take these images of your sporting event. Unless anyone has any questions, you are welcome to contact us at the details that we've listed here. We're always welcome to chat about sports law or any law in that matter of fact. If there's anything or legal advice that you may need, feel free to call us on our landline or contact us at our info@legalese.co.za email address. Okay. If there's no other questions from anyone else, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. I hope I didn't run through this too quickly. And again, if you have any questions on sports law or anything that I've chatted about in this webinar, just contact us and we'll be happy to respond. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.